Good morning from a very wet and particularly miserable Paris, where we are going to be here live on Sky News' Facebook channel for the next 10 minutes or so, talking about the French elections, the most extraordinary election campaign, probably in living memory, and one which could have profound implications, not just for France, but for the European Union, perhaps further afield too. I'll be here, as I say, for the next 10 minutes. You can post questions along the bottom of the screen, and I will do my very best to answer them over the next 10 minutes. Let's give you a bit of background first. Why are we standing here on this street? Well, because that is the headquarters of the Republican Party. That's the centre-right party in France. And right now, I think it would be fair to describe them as being in a self-destruct mode. The background is that their candidate for the president, the centre-right candidate for president, is a man called Francois Fillon, a former prime minister. He was chosen by the Republican Party to be the candidate for the president. But over the past 40 days or so, he's been embroiled in something that's become known as Penelope Gate. His wife is Welsh. She is called Penelope Fillon. And she, it is alleged, has been paid for the past 2 decades by her husband for working in his parliamentary office, except that it's alleged she didn't actually do any work. She earned up to 800,000 euros for a job that many claim she didn't do. That's raised, got up the judicial system to become a criminal inquiry, and so many are calling for him to stand down. He hasn't, though. Today he has defiantly said he will continue, and the runner-up in the Republican contest, a man called Alain Juppé, another former Prime Minister, has today said he's not interested in replacing Mr. Fillon. Let's have a look at a few questions that you've got coming in here. Why does Alain Juppé not want to run in the election? Well, Alain Juppé, himself a former Prime Minister back in the 1990s, was the runner-up in the Republican contest. They have primaries here, rather like they do in the United States. So each political party, left, right, centre, will have primary elections to choose their leader. It was expected that Alain Juppé would become the leader, but for one reason or another he wasn't chosen. Francois Fillon went ahead and was expected to do very well in the presidential campaign. But because of Penelope Gate, he's not doing so well, and so there have been plenty of calls for Alain Juppé to stand in his place. But today in Bordeaux, where Alain Juppé is the mayor, he made a statement and made quite clear he's not the man for the job. He alluded to the fact that he's not young, he's in his mid-60s. He doesn't believe he is the sort of candidate that France needs right now. He described France as an ill country. He knows, as many in France do, that the public here are pretty fed up with the establishment parties. They want something different. They want someone younger. He doesn't think that he's the man. He's also been embroiled in the past in his own financial scandals. He's well aware of that, and he knows that perhaps he wouldn't be such a good option. And so he's decided he is going to stand aside, and defiant Mr. Fillon will continue. A couple more questions coming in here. Can Francois Fillon ever be trusted by the French nation and his party following his scandal? Good question, and the answer from certainly a significant proportion is no. This is a man who, it is alleged, and we must stress that at the moment, he's been charged with nothing at the moment. He is alleged to have made significant family personal gain by paying his wife for a job that she didn't do. More than that, paying his children as well, 2 of his children, for a job that he didn't do, that they didn't do. So there are many that think that with that scandal hanging over him, he cannot stand as president. But an equal number think that he's still the man. He's the only chance. Just over the river from here, in the Trocadero near the Eiffel Tower, yesterday afternoon, he held a make-or-break rally. That was described as a make-or-break because people wanted to see just how many people would turn out. I should think that they would have been watching that in this building behind me. This is the headquarters of the Republican Party, where they've been really trying to work out whether or not Francois Fillon is their man, or whether perhaps he should stand aside. But I wonder what they're thinking today. They must be thinking that they're in a very difficult position, because they know that the polls are not reflecting very well on Mr. Fillon at the moment, but they also know that there isn't really any alternative. One alternative is Alain Juppé. He said he's not going to do it. Another alternative is Nicolas Sarkozy, a man who has sacks worth of baggage. I imagine he will not be very electable. He's not an alternative. So who is their man? I'm holding the morning papers here. These came in obviously before Mr. Juppé made his announcement that he will not replace Mr. Fillon. This one, Libération, the headline there, not batting an eyelid, a reference there to the rally yesterday. Monsieur Fillon there, his embattled wife Penelope there, not batting an eyelid. He is, so he says, going to continue to run. What have we got here? Le Parisien here. The headline just down there on the left-hand side, Fillon, no one can stop me from being candidate. He said in a statement last week that it's not up to the judicial process, to the judges to judge him. It's up to the electorate, it's up to the people to judge him, which is why he says he will carry on. He will not stand down. Le Figaro, the headline there, right in the middle with the photograph, Fillon hits the streets to save his candidacy. A real reflection there of the fact that this is a man fighting to remain the centre-right candidate for the presidency. The last one we'll show you here in the wind and the rain. Fillon hits the streets to save his candidacy. There it is, right up at the top there. A very similar headline on the front of that paper. Now, why I mentioned at the beginning, I'll just give these to Ed, who's happily standing over just to my left there. Why the defiance by Fillon? Well, because he says that there is no one else, well, they all believe that there is really no one else, for the time being at least, who can replace him. Why is it so important? Well, because if the far right does well in this election, and they could well do, if the centre-right party is in self-destruct mode, the far right leader is Marine Le Pen. She's anti-EU, she's protectionist, she's populist. She wants to call for a Frexit. She thinks Brexit is a great thing, and so she believes that she would certainly cause massive, massive problems for the European Union. I've been neglecting your questions here. A few more, and a reminder that you can ask more questions if you want to at the bottom of the screen. Has Francois Fillon's wife said much in recent days? No. She gave a brief statement or an interview to a newspaper a couple of days ago in which she tried to explain that the jobs she did were not from his office but from her home. She opened his letters, she organised his letters, all that sort of thing. The jobs of a secretary, of an assistant, but the reason why many people wondered why she hadn't been seen in his office much over the past 2 decades is because she said she did that work from home. More questions here. Has Francois Fillon's honesty over the expenses scandal gone in his favour with his supporters? Difficult one to answer, really. I think his supporters, the base of his supporters, will always see him as the right man. He is far to the right of centre, perhaps closer to Marine Le Pen, or certainly closer to Marine Le Pen on the far right than Alain Juppé is. Alain Juppé is more of a centrist candidate, and so those people who are on the right of French politics, who could never vote for the far right, Marine Le Pen, and all the racist connotations that has for many, see Mr. Fillon as a good alternative, and so they will always want to back him. But on the other side of the centre-right, the more centrist people, they have always been concerned that Mr. Fillon is too right-wing, and so they hoped that perhaps Mr. Juppé would take over. But as we've discovered today, he shows no sign of doing that. I suppose we should talk a little bit about the other candidates in the presidency. The centre-right candidate, as I say right now, Francois Fillon. The far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen of the National Front, a party founded by her father, once overtly racist, overtly xenophobic. She's tried to sanitise the party in recent years, and to a large extent, I would say, that sanitisation has resonated. People who once upon a time would not have considered for a minute voting for the far right are now thinking that perhaps change is wanted. I was struck a couple of weeks ago, we were down in the south of France talking to voters, and one man said to me, that he never considered himself to be far right, doesn't really consider himself to be far right now, and yet he's fed up with the establishment, he's fed up with the mainstream, he's looking for something different, and so perhaps with a heavy heart, he's going to vote for Marine Le Pen. It struck me because it was a very similar conversation to one I had in Pennsylvania in America just before the election there. Voters there telling me that they thought that Donald Trump was a knucklehead, in the words of one American voter, but he was a new dog and that perhaps they could teach him new tricks. In other words, he was a big risk, Donald Trump, but a risk they were willing to take for something different. I think for a significant proportion of French voters, Marine Le Pen, far right, is a risk, but a risk that they're prepared to take. So that's the right and the far right of politics here. On the left, we have Benoît Hamon. He is the Socialist Party candidate. The Socialists are in government at the moment. Their popularity is at a record low, and so he's struggling from that. There is a new young gun, though, a centrist, Emmanuel Macron, once a socialist. He's shunned the establishment. He is now the man many people think could be the next French president, an independent candidate, a young, youthful organisation that he is now leading. Sorry, I've got a bit of a runny nose here. It's very, very cold. And so he is perhaps the man to watch. A couple more questions. Who do I think is likely to win the French election? Here we go. This is the moment where I have to eat my hat if I'm wrong. My sense is that Emmanuel Macron is the man to put your money on. I think he will go through to the second round, and I think perhaps if he does go through to the second round of the election, he will almost certainly win. But never say never Marine Le Pen. Just a few months ago, it seemed inconceivable that Marine Le Pen could become the French president. But for all the reasons I've mentioned just now, I think you'd be wrong to say that she will never become the French president. Just look at the fact that France is struggling and now. The economy is tanking. It's really not lifted much in the past decade. Unemployment is at record levels. Youth unemployment is a quarter of people under the age of 25 are unemployed. There are the jitters of terror attacks. All that is feeding very well into Marine Le Pen's campaign. She is expected to get through the first round of the election, which is at the end of April. At the moment, the polls say she will lose the second round. But as I say never Marine Le Pen. Thanks for watching.